Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Derrick, CEO of Metropolitan Protective Services and former Chief of Police in a town in Maryland. Derrick, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thank you so much for having me.
And between COVID-19, a contentious national election, and the social unrest that we've experienced in 2020, top of mind, of course, is ensuring safety for businesses and employees. During this time, how should companies, large and small, be thinking about the return to work strategy and maintaining a measure of safety for employees and property?
Well, obviously, I think all companies should always make sure that they stay briefed with the latest CDC requirements. And I think just depending on what style business that you actually have as relates to bringing your employees back, make sure everybody's wearing, standard stuff like masks, hand sanitation, keeping their hands sanitized, social distancing, which I know it can be a challenge if you're working in an office environment. And so some of the recommendations that we've been putting out is maybe you have off days. So you have a certain, let's say, everybody's birthday that ends in an even number, report to work on a particular day. And then everybody whose birthday is on an odd number, they report the opposite day. So you can keep the congestion of the actual office space down to a minimum.
Right. And that would make sense. And of course, I also want to touch on some of the social unrest that we're seeing recently. I mean, many of us work in large cities, and of course, that's a target for this. So what's your best advice for employees that are going to have to start the commute back and forth to work?
Well, I think they need to, just really, I know if it's possible for them to actually drive opposed to using public transportation. Still, you take all the precautionary measures that you would normally take as relates to the COVID-19 CDC guidelines, as far as face masks, things and social distancing and things of that nature. But you want to, but if you have to catch the subway, you really want to button up. As far as some people wearing face shields and things of that nature. Those are things that I would definitely strongly recommend that individuals do as it relates to getting back and forth as it relates to COVID-19.
Okay, well, let's also talk about the safety aspect as well as it relates to senior management. So senior management teams, of course, have a whole other set of safety issues to be aware of. And what can they do to best protect themselves?
Well, I think the biggest thing is communication. Communication and regularly testing. I think some of the things that we've seen and seen put in place, I know with a lot of the governments starting to reopen back up, we've been tasked with putting together what they call, I don't want to call them checkpoints, but we have a liaison stationed outside of the facility doing, taking temperatures, doing just small preventive maintenance just to make sure that people that are entering the facility are not contagious. So I think as it relates to senior management, they want to start strategizing things that can impact the workforce without dragging down the morale and everyone's there to do business. So it's going to be a challenge no matter what.
Right, and then what's the most effective way for security teams to communicate with employees?
Well, I think from a security nature, I think, it's very important for them to stay engaged with the management. So so everybody has a clear understanding who's playing what role. Because you still have what we call actors that would want to do nefarious things, and security still has to play a role within a work environment that work environments that have security. I think those roles need to be redefined and specifically understand what the outcome of the goal, what goals are the outcome what management like best to have. So for example, if someone was coming and having a domestic scenario, is that security officer prepared as far as with their PPE to address that kind of matter? So those kinds of conversations need to definitely take place with the security team and the upper management team, or the individuals who act as security. Not everyone is a security guard. Certain people act as almost fiduciary responsibility of providing safety for a work environment.
So are security teams also responsible for employee safety outside of the office. What happens if my home is right in the middle of where a protest is taking place? Certainly, many people live in Manhattan and work in Manhattan, and their homes have exposure to this. So are security teams responsible for that also?
Well, security teams are not. So unfortunately, security, it's usually only limited to whoever is paying for the security service. So for example, if you work in a office building and your office building is secured, then that security's jurisdiction stops at that double door. So it stops when you come in the door, you're good. Once you leave that door, their jurisdiction has nothing to do with anything on the outside of that. Sometimes you may have some sidewalk detail. Now, as relates to the civil unrest and the protests that we're seeing, I mean, the only thing I can recommend for the citizens and everybody who has to report the work is just to be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what's going on. Make sure you look at the news to make sure you use the best practices. Some days it may not be the best time to go to work if you just have they're riding in the streets out in front of your house. But I think the best thing that we can do is use our news outlets, our DHS reports, and really stay engaged with the community to see what the temperature is as relates to rioting and things of that nature as the civil unrest as things get closer to this election.
So Derrick, where does Metropolitan Protective Services fit into this ecosystem?
I'm sorry, say again?
Where does your company, Metropolitan Protective Services, fit into the ecosystem here?
Well, we fit in various ways. So a lot of ways what we're doing, we have a lot of high-end clients who have huge retail facilities and complexes. And so we have to work continuously with DHS and FBI as it relates to getting continuous updates on not just the COVID-19 breakout, but also on the climate that the country's in today. So we're dealing with some stuff is more clandestine, meaning that we do executive protection, but a lot of it is just right on the front. A lot of our guys are on the front line. We're helping assist in a lot of cities as it relates to their COVID-19 fallback plan, as far as they have a lot of individuals who have COVID-19 are waiting to confirm that, staying in hotels, and we're assisting in that. And even as it relates to employees coming back to work, we're on the front lines doing tests and things of that nature as it relates to them being able to get into the building. So we're working with our partners, and we're working with whether they're federal, whether they're local, and private, to make sure that we try to get the workforce back up to speed as any way that we can assist in that nature, whether it be security, whether it be other measures as it relates to safety and security.
Well, Derrick, here's an interesting question to wrap up with. How has COVID-19 in the current social situation, more importantly, the social situation, impacted the way security professionals approach their job? How did they keep themselves safe? I mean, we see it on social media all the time that, certainly security professionals and law enforcement are either being targeted or they're just having to, deal with their job in a very, very different way than perhaps many of them have been trained for.
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. It's a very challenging time for individuals who wear a uniform right now. It's right now, for whatever reason, law enforcement has been targeted, and anybody associated with law enforcement is being targeted as well. So it's a lot of precautionary measures that officers are now taking to approach any situation. We've seen officers just sitting in patrol cars being shot. We've seen people conducting themselves in riots, taking their aggression out on the police department. So it is a very vicarious situation right now as it relates to security and the police department. And so we try to work with our law enforcement partners to figure out new strategies and ways that we can address crime, because crime is not stopping as it relates to the general crime, even though right now we're in the middle of civil unrest, we're in the middle of COVID-19, but you still got the robberies, you still got the theft from autos, you still got the routine stuff that goes on. So it's been lots of dialogue between police agencies, federal agencies. What's the best approach? What's the best approach to deal with for law enforcement being a target, but also having to respond to a scene, not knowing whether it's an ambush or is it a legitimate call. So this is a very vicarious time for law enforcement. Anyone who wears that uniform it's very, very interesting times.
Yeah, it certainly is. And of course, we thank you for your service and so forth. And hopefully, we can look at the silver lining for 2020 and hopefully take the opportunity for, all the sides to come together and to reevaluate their approaches. We certainly could use some of that for 2021. Derrick, it was great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talk.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
You got it. And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.